Toronto Mayor Rob Ford and his brother Councillor Doug Ford say local media organizations are out to get them, that the Toronto Star, among others, are practicing gutter journalism. We invited the four major Toronto newspapers, the Star, the Globe and Mail, the National Post and the Toronto Sun, who declined, to give us their perspective on how the Fourth Estate should cover public scandals and where the line should be drawn when it comes to holding public officials accountable. So, joining us now on that, John Cruikshank, he's publisher of the Toronto Star, Steve Maurice, editor-in-chief of the National Post, and Marcus G., urban affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail. And while I am really grateful to the three of you for coming here tonight, I do want to say the Sun initially agreed to come, and then something came up and they had to bail at the last minute, so I just put that out there for what it's worth. John Cruikshank, starting with you. Dave. Your paper got it started. You're the guys who said they saw the video, and the last couple of weeks of fiasco in the mayor's office all stem from that. Here's the question I get asked a lot that I want to give you a chance to speak to, which is, how much of your coverage is based on a genuine desire to keep public officials accountable, and how much is based on selling papers, because we know you're doing a lot of that these days?
Well, this actually doesn't drive consumption of papers particularly. If anything, the business consequences have been negative.
How so?
Well, because we do have people who are very, very staunch supporters of the mayor.
Who subscribe to the Star?
Who subscribe to the Star, and who, like you, make the mistake of imagining that the fiasco in the mayor's office started with a Star story, rather than, in fact, started with actions of the mayor outside his office.
But you're saying that the need to keep the mayor accountable actually drives your coverage rather than sales?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How would you convince people who may be a little skeptical about that?
Well, you know, if they wanted to look at the business case that we have, I could, I think, fairly easily get them there. Look, the reality is the Star has been in business in this city for more than a century, holding politicians accountable, but also supporting the growth and expansion of this great city. Our concerns really are about good governance, because that's what's going to profit us most.
Okay. The Star broke the story of the video. Your newspaper, a couple of weekends ago, broke a story, Marcus, about Doug Ford, the mayor's brother, having some links to a hash trade in the north end of Etobicoke many years ago, when, I guess about 30 years ago. And I'll ask you the same kind of question. How much of that story is based, and let's establish for the fact that you're not here to speak for the paper, you're not the publisher, right. You are a columnist, but how much do you suspect stories like that are driven by the bottom line versus a need to keep politicians accountable?
Well, you know, I've been hearing all through my career, you guys just want to sell papers. The funny thing is, you know, I've yet to meet a journalist who cares at all about selling newspapers. I mean, publishers, in fact, often complain reporters don't care enough about the bottom line. They are, you know, we really just are interested in the story. The business side is kind of alien to most reporters, and the reporters have been driving this story, so I don't buy that. I think Ford has had a pretty fair press, actually. I mean, in a lot of American cities, I think he would have been run out of town on a rail by now. They would have been after him from day one about his personal side. And in Canada, we're more cautious about that. And only kind of late and I think reluctantly have papers even started to delve into this when it started coming across the desk, and it was obvious that there was something weird going on there. So I simply don't buy that this is some kind of vendetta.
You use the word cautious. There will be people who will say, you guys published a huge takeout in your weekend paper, which I assume is your highest selling newspaper, the Saturday paper, based on 10 anonymous sources. They will not call that cautious coverage. What do you say? Well,
you know, we've been criticized for, in other parts of the media, for sitting on that story for a long time. That story went through umpteen due diligence exercises, double checking, triple checking, lawyers involved, editors involved in interviewing sources, and only after this became a relevant issue did we finally publish, and with a detailed explanation of our methodology. So we certainly didn't rush into publication with this stuff.
I'm going to pick up on one more follow-up here, the use of the word relevant. There will be those who will say, you're publishing information about what a city councillor did 30 years ago. Different time, maybe a different guy in some respects. How is that relevant to his doing his job today?
Well, as you mentioned, I can't really speak to the high-level decision-making that went into that. From a reader's point of view and a journalist's point of view, I think the feeling probably was that now that these drug allegations are out there, now that there was talk about possible connections between the Fords, the mayor, and sketchy people in that community, that it did become relevant, and that this is part of a larger context.
Stephen, how do you decide how to report on this, given that it's the competition that really broke the video story in the first place, and the competition that has this other story about potential involvement of the mayor's brother in drug dealings 30 years ago? How do you guys guide your coverage accordingly?
Well, it was clear very early on from the time the Star first reported on the video that this was of huge and significant public interest. We didn't have the video. Obviously, we had to decide to what extent we were just going to follow up on what the Star was doing and chase them on that particular thing. But it was obvious that it was of massive public interest, that all of our readers were going to want to read about that as much as readers of the other media. And so we had to approach it cautiously, in the sense that we had to attribute that particular story to the Toronto Star, and then follow up on it in the ways that any media outlet would, which is seek reaction, try to get the mayor's reaction, which has proven rather difficult, and assess what the effect of that is going to be on the community as a whole.
Do you believe the video exists?
Well, it seems to me there's absolutely no doubt a video exists. The notion that there is no video, to me, is a non-starter.
Well, the mayor says there's no video.
Well, the mayor can say what, the mayor's going to say what he wants to say. Within the journalistic community, I think all of us we're competitors, but we respect, for the most part, the work that the various outlets do. I don't know Robin Doolittle or Kevin Donovan, but I know of them, and I know that they have terrific reputations as journalists, as investigative reporters, and I have zero doubt that they saw a video that they believe depicts the mayor doing what he did. So yes, there is a video. Do I know whether it is legitimate, whether the content, the Toronto Star doesn't know whether it is really any more than anybody else does. They know a video exists that looks like it's the mayor doing that.
Well, let me put that to John. You had to put...
And to be clear about the mayor's position, remember, after a week, he came out and he said he wasn't sure whether there was a video or not. I mean, first he said, how could he comment on a video that apparently showed him smoking crack if he hadn't seen it? That, number one. And secondly, he wasn't even sure whether a video showing him smoking crack existed. Now, Steve, you and I are pretty sure there's no video of you or me smoking crack. And there's a reason for that. We never have. The mayor was puzzled about that the first day. That maybe it's a memory issue, it's a neurological thing, I don't know. But it was very, very odd. Now, the next day, he said, there is no video. Several days later, his deputy said, oh yeah, I'm sure there's a video. We're just not sure whether it's been manipulated or not. And people are now pretty sure that there was a video taken. Now, was it one that was stage managed by Steven Spielberg? Or was it one where the mayor was actually present? We don't know that. We don't have the cell phone. We haven't been able to go through it, digit by digit. What we have is a couple of people who work for the Toronto Star, very seasoned reporters who have seen our video. We have a reporter from Gawker who has seen a video. We have other people in the community who have seen a video. They all say it looks like the mayor. We've subsequently also had indications that there's been an attempt by people around the mayor to obtain a video. I don't think that was a video that doesn't exist.
Well, in fact, your paper said the mayor knew where the video was and gave an address to staff members to go find it.
That's absolutely correct. That's what we understand.
But let me ask you this. You haven't seen the video, have you?
No.
And you have basically had to put this century-old institution in this city You know, in a bit of a precarious position because you're, in essence, publishing stories on the basis of something that two of your people have seen,
yes.
but you haven't, your lawyers haven't, your senior editors haven't. Does that keep you up at night?
No, and it doesn't any more than reports that my reporters bring back from Syria keep me up at night. We rely upon the integrity, the experience, and the intelligence of our reporters. I don't worry at all about Kevin Donovan or Robin Doolittle when they say to me, I have seen something, it appears to be the mayor. We came out with a story. We didn't say, this is the mayor. We said, this appears to be the mayor, and we've got two people who came to that conclusion separately. I feel no concern whatever about that. And I do feel there is an extremely compelling public interest in that material.
Let me also put some of the other things that I have heard from people out there to you three and get you to comment on that. Stephen, for example, we have heard people express concern. John Tory, on his very fine radio show on News Talk 1010, says, I don't like the idea of people going onto the mayor's property at his home, for example, when he gets into his car on his driveway. Reporters shouldn't do that. Or if he's buying a cup of coffee or a donut in Tim Hortons and people are putting cameras and microphones in his face, he didn't like that either. Says, you want to get to the mayor? Stand outside his office. That's where his place of business is. That's where to do that kind of thing. What's your view on that?
If the mayor was doing what he's supposed to be doing, which is responding to questions from the public, really, through the media, then reporters wouldn't have to be chasing him, waiting for him outside his house or waiting for him at Tim Hortons. The fact is, this mayor has decided not to answer questions about this issue, and it is the job. It's the responsibility of the journalist to try and get those answers.
You think it looks bad, though, to go onto his driveway and
there are people who are
chase him when he's getting into his car?
There are people who are going to think it looks bad. Absolutely.
Are you one of those people?
No, I think we're doing what we have to do, which is to try to get answers about this really significant issue, and the mayor's not providing them. And what are we supposed to do? Just back off and say, well, I guess he's not going to talk about it. Let's go report on something else. That's not going to happen. This issue is too important.
Marcus, has any of not the coverage itself, but what you have to do to get the coverage, any of that cross any lines in your view?
I don't think so. I don't think actually any of us relishes chasing the mayor down the driveway going out of City Hall or certainly staking out his house. Nobody wants to do that. The only reason people have done that is because A, there's this explosive allegation out there that has gone all around the world. The mayor for a full week said almost nothing about it apart from a few second bursts saying it was ridiculous. You referred to that coffee shop incident. That was Austin Delaney from CTV. I watched that carefully. He did a really good job.
Austin did.
Yeah. He walked into the Tim Hortons because the mayor had been refusing, I think by that time, for several days to say anything. And he said, Mayor, sir, he called him mayor, he called him sir. He was very polite and respectful. He said, will you please answer these questions? Did you smoke crack cocaine? It's not an irrelevant question.
No,
and the mayor has still not fully answered it. And so when you see pictures of reporters shouting questions at the mayor, it's not because we're jackals or maggots, as the mayor used in his colorful phrase. It's because that we're trying to do our job.
I understand that, but again, fair-minded people may come to the conclusion that while the mayor is a public figure, even he is entitled to a bit of a zone of privacy. And when he's popping into Tim Hortons for a minute to grab a cup of coffee, yes, admittedly, he's out in public and it's a public place, but their view would be that's not the place to scrum the mayor. You don't agree?
In almost any other situation, I would agree. I mean, I think Canadian journalists in particular have been very careful about the private lives of public figures. Maybe in this case, we've been too careful. You have to ask yourself now, if people at the time that the mayor was running for office or early in his term, if people then had started turning over a few rocks, I wonder if all of this might have been avoided. So I think we do this sort of thing with reluctance, but in this case, I think it's amply justified.
John, your view on this?
No, frankly, it's enormously difficult for reporters to do this kind of work. It disrupts the relationships that tend to be so powerful and useful for reporters. It's actually very difficult to get reporters to ask questions in this way, to deal with issues that many deem private. But frankly, you know, since the whole notion of you know, the role of character in the case of a candidate or a governing member has become so important, it seems you can't restrict people from asking fundamental questions about who this mayor really is,
anywhere.
who this prime minister really is.
You can ask those questions anywhere?
I think you can ask them anywhere in public. It's obviously violating, you know, someone's property rights, somebody's, you know, ability to have a sanctuary is both bad manners and in some cases illegal. But yes, I think when public figures go out into the public, as they so often do to their own advantage, that they can be engaged in a respectful conversation.
Let's really get back to first principles here and find out what the key objection is to what the mayor has done here. Besides the fact that it's probably illegal to smoke crack, which is not insignificant. But let's just say, we all know of politicians who do things that are probably from a personal standpoint ill-advised. They may be drunks, they may be doing drugs on the side, whatever. But if they're doing their job, is that any of our business? So my question to you is, if the mayor is doing his job and he's getting his agenda through, and City Hall's still picking up the garbage and paving the roads and doing all those other things that they're supposed to do, if the mayor has a drug problem privately, is that our business?
It doesn't seem, though, that, I mean, those are very big ifs. And I think most people, certainly those of us who are employers with one of our hats on, don't think that doing your job adequately and having a drug habit are reconcilable. Now, I'm not making, you know, I'm not saying the mayor is a drug addict. I'm not saying that any of this has been substantiated. But what I'm saying is, would that be a problem were it to be true? Absolutely.
Even if he could do his job?
Steve, you couldn't work for TVO and be a drug addict. I mean, that's
Nobody voted for me.
It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter. I don't believe. And look, in the case of this mayor, and let's take the drugs off the table, but let's deal with one of your big ifs. The Star, amongst others, through Freedom of Information, have actually looked at the mayor's date book. And let me tell you, the conclusion we came to, and there was nobody to fight this, is the mayor's dance card is not really full.
No, you've been reporting that.
We have.
Right. I mean, the question is the mayor really doing his job properly? The Star and the Globe, as John says, have looked at his records. He tends to roll in a bit late and leave a bit early. Reporters have noticed for some time that his appearance at events, he's often late or doesn't show up, cancels. There's this report that he was under the influence of something at a military function, a military ball. The mayor is a public figure. He has to be functioning fully at all times, particularly when he's at a public event. He has to show up for things. I think the press actually was pretty cautious about this stuff because we all had a sense that something strange was going on. And this goes right back to the campaign when you remember and before the campaign, you may remember the famous Air Canada Centre incident in which he delivered a drunken tirade to a couple sitting next to him. There was a domestic incident at his house and so on. The press was pretty careful. They mentioned those, but they didn't turn over many rocks. So there was a bit of a pattern here, and it's all come to a head now. So I think the question is whether it's affecting his job, and I think there are indications that yes. So I think that makes it a more legitimate area of inquiry.
Of the three newspapers represented here today, I think yours was the only one, Stephen, that endorsed Mayor Ford in the last campaign. When you have your discussions at a high editorial level, And when I say hi, I don't mean reference to anything. Just to be clear here.
That hardly ever happens.
You got any regrets about that or second thoughts?
Well, look, I mean, we made that decision, whatever it was, 3 years ago, in a fairly different context. I mean, to say 3 years later we found out a number of things about Mr. Ford since then. So 2020 hindsight is fine but in the context of that particular election and the choices that were available to the City of Toronto at that time, we felt that Mr. Ford represented an approach to governance that was going to be the right one from our point of view, and the other candidates didn't. So, you know, I mean, there had been incidents, some suspected and some factual, around the mayor, but they seem to us either to have been far enough in the past or to have been relatively minor, such that they didn't change our view of what his governance was going to be like if he was elected.
John, your newspaper did something kind of cute the other day. I don't know if it was Catherine's idea or whose idea it was, but one of your columnists, Catherine Porter, went to Etobicoke, the mayor's home territory, held a sign in her hand, and said, "I work at the Toronto Star. Will you speak with me about Rob Ford, please?" And here's some of what she had to write. She said, "Ford Nation does not believe the Star and Gawker, nor do they believe the Globe and Mail, which came out with its own investigation into brother number 2 this past weekend. They believe there is a vendetta against the Fords and that we journalists are making money along the way. Democracy depends on a strong press to keep power in check, but what if the press has lost the trust of the electorate? We are in troubling times." Do you think it's fair to say that Ford Nation has stuck with the Ford brothers through thick and thin, and most of this has been pretty thick?
Yes, well, most of the polling indicates that he is down to the bedrock, but the bedrock is solid. These are folks who so strongly support the ideological views of the mayor that they are indifferent to the character issues. And you know, frankly, I'm not saying that's not a respectable position. Right? I mean, it's fine. We're not going to convert those folks to a different view. I think a different view, frankly, of both the ideology and the character are appropriate, and we've said that from the very beginning. But you know, those people feel very strongly about how the city should be run. They don't trust politicians to make investments in a way that will leave them with a sense that their taxes have been well spent. So in fact, they would like to live in a world where our infrastructure is provided through the private sector, where everything is provided through the private sector. My own view is that's not a world that many of the rest of us would like to live in, and I believe it's a world where economic growth and certainly economic security would be really endangered.
Marcus, when other institutions in our society screw up, we rely on the press to ferret it out and tell us all about it. What happens when the press goes too far? Who are you accountable to?
Well, I like something that Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, said recently. He was talking about the restrictions that are proposed to be put on the British press after the press scandals there. And he was dead against. He said, it was a colorful phrase. He said, "Gutter politics deserve a gutter press." I was putting it a little strongly, perhaps, but what he was saying was, the press does a useful job in society. In Britain, for instance, it was the gutter press who uncovered that huge MP's expenses scandal some years ago. There was a huge transformative event in British politics, holding individual politicians to account. So I think that very much our job is to ask rude and pertinent questions, sometimes to shout them if necessary, sometimes to get right in the mayor's face if necessary. We don't, as John said, we don't like doing that on an individual basis, a very uncomfortable thing to do. But, you know, the press isn't there to be mealy-mouthed or to pat anybody on the back. It's to poke and prod and turn over rocks.
Comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable.
And sometimes there's stuff under the rocks, you know.
When in the pursuit of finding those things under the rocks, in the view of some members of the public, you go too far, what recourse do they have?
Well, I'm probably slightly more, maybe not a Ford bedrock person, but of those who think that the private sector and the free market offers controls of its own. We answer to our readers. Ultimately, they are going to decide whether what we are offering them in the form of content is something that they think is valuable, that's useful. So we're answerable, first of all, from a financial point of view, on people actually choosing to read our products. That keeps us in check. Increasingly, obviously we're subject to libel laws and so on, so that keeps us in check in terms of being able to just make stuff up about people and say whatever we want. So there are legal constraints on us. Increasingly, I think in the digital age, we are called to account more frequently, more vociferously, more instantly than we ever were before.
More people looking over your shoulder now.
Absolutely, and that's a good thing. That's fantastic. That's one of the great things about the digital age is, comment threads are not necessarily the most representative of public opinion, but I read them because I want to see. Sometimes I read them because I want to see whether we got something wrong. And people will call us out. They'll call us out right away there. They'll call us out on Twitter. So we have to be aware of all of those things, and we are accountable. And if you thumb your nose at that, you can very quickly create a backlash against you and what you're doing that can have serious repercussions on your reputation and even on your bottom line.
John. And Steve, the other thing is that all of our newspapers are voluntary members of the Ontario Press Council, which means that people who don't have the means or the determination to actually take us to court, they have another court. If they have been wronged, they can require us to print clarification or apology in our publications. I think it's really important. We are, of course, subject to law, as we should be, but we are big, powerful institutions. We can fight little people to a standstill. There's no question about that. And so I think the fact that we have voluntarily said, no, we want people to have voice, is really important.
We just got a couple of minutes left here, and I want to ask you, don't you wish you just bought the damn video in the first place?
There are days, yes. But you know what? The principle of buying news, it is so significant that we haven't done that.
Rosie DiMano thinks you should have.
I know that, and believe me, Rosie has let me know that personally as well as publicly, and I'm a huge admirer of Rosie. The problem with buying news is that you create a market in false news. It is one of those market-driven exercises that we have to be very cautious about. I think the issues about buying the video at this point are quite different. I think there are legal issues that might suggest buying a video would be ethically the appropriate thing for us to do at this point. It's not clear that the video is available anymore.
Mm-hmm. If you could buy the video at the Globe and Mail, would you buy the video at the Globe and Mail?
Well, I can't speak for my paper on that. I think we feel the same way as John does and the Star does about paying for news, is that it does tend to impugn the source if they're in it for the money. This may be a special case. As you know, there's this campaign to raise money. It's got over 200,000 now.
They raised enough
to buy the thing. So,
but now the video seems to have.
Maybe the public will buy it in effect.
Except no one. They've raised enough money crowdsourcing this thing, but now they can't seem to find the video or the guys who had it. So now what do? Do you wish you'd bought it? If you had a chance to buy it, would you have?
I couldn't afford to buy it, but
Yes, I know.
But I would agree with both Marcus and John that this is one of those cases that makes you maybe wonder whether there are exceptions to a rule. Our code of ethics also forbids the paying for news stories, but when so much rides on the public being able to see this particular piece of video,
it really could settle the story
it
right
could,
there, couldn't it?
And it would
if
be,
it came to light.
And it's important that it be settled.
And we spent months pleading with the folks who held the video to make it public, in the public interest.
And they wouldn't do it.
And they wouldn't do it.
You are going to pull what's left of your hair out if that mayor wins re-election in 2014, aren't you?
It's going fast enough on its own speed.
I want to thank all three of you for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. John Cruikshank, the publisher of the Toronto Star, Stephen Murice, the editor-in-chief of the National Post, and Marcus Gee, urban affairs columnist at the Globe and Mail. Thanks very much, guys.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.